Okay, I want to take you then right to the wildcat strike that occurred in February 2012 with the General Support Service. Tell us a few things that you know about what led up to that, and then give us a few memories and a few things to explain what did happen that day, okay?
We were in a very it was somewhat of an aggressive bargaining process, and you know, we, as a vice president assigned to the Edmonton area, I was working very closely with Local 54 at that point, and with healthcare locals across the province. So we did a lot of educational meetings in terms of getting members to understand exactly what was happening through the bargaining process, getting them to understand exactly what was being offered and not being offered. So it was one of the best organized bargaining round of bargaining that I had actually seen in this union, and that, to me, that was really important. It's actually having the members be completely involved in what was happening and empowering them so that they could you know, deal with some of the issues, some of the things that were being said by the employer. You know, there were comments being made that GSS workers were a dime a dozen, that they could be hired from the street to get them to do their jobs, that any monkey could do their job, and those were things that the employer was saying at that time. So people were getting progressively angrier, and they needed to know that the union was behind them, and they needed to know that the union wanted their involvement, that we wanted their voices heard at every process of this bargaining. So we did a lot of that. We did a lot of preparing for what was coming, I think, in a lot of ways. So people were informed, and you know, the night previous to the actual walking out, we had meetings and talking about the possibility of something like this happening to some degree. There was a lot of talk about, you know, there was a lot of angry members that wanted to walk out, that wanted this type of action to force the hand of the employer, because they were tired of being disrespected. They were tired of hearing all those negative things coming from the bargaining table and in the media. I don't want to describe it as a magical moment, but it was definitely a very powerful moment where solidarity was really felt, and I think it made us so much more stronger and successful that day. People didn't want to go back without having some clarity around whether or not they still had a job to go back to, or, you know, if at all we had kind of made any kind of movement towards getting what they needed to get in this bargaining process. But I think it sent the employer a very clear message that these dime a dozen people were necessary and were essential in the healthcare field, and that without them, the hospitals got shut down. And so they could not say those same things after that wildcat strike. It was incredibly powerful, and you know, I was so fortunate to be part of that process, just to watch all those workers again come out. It was incredibly powerful for me.
Okay, you know, that was very well said about the solidarity that was, and you know, the effect that it had on the employer. Very well said. What about the effect on the union? You were a vice president at, you know, at that time. The union must have experienced that strike in a certain way, and it must have had some kind of effect.
Oh, I think it did. I think it showed the union, it reminded the executive, it reminded the organization that we are a grassroots organization, and as a labor movement, we need to allow our grassroots to have that place in order to own the bargaining process. My biggest beef as a vice president was actually having to deal with the reality that bargaining is so far removed from the actual grassroots members that it's become almost a judicial kind of system where, you know, you have you know, negotiators and people that actually are there to represent workers, but it's actually the workers that don't really have an honest 100% say of what's happening, because the negotiators are always trying to negotiate. We all understand what labor relations is, and it's always a give and take process. But why do workers always have to give so much? And I think you know, sometimes we question that as workers. And this strike, I think, kind of reminded us that we're actually there for our members, and it brought that reality back to the union, that's where our strength comes from, that's where our existence comes from, and that's where we need to kind of continue to support if we want to grow as a labor movement in this province.